Hey everyone, in this video I will be showing you how you can use your tempera paints to create primary, secondary, and tertiary colors. Please note that this video was created mainly for those who have only red, blue, and yellow colors in their palette. However, if you have secondaries such as violet, orange, and green, this video will work for you too. Before we begin, these will be the materials that you will need to get started. You will need your tempera paints, some sort of a disposable plate or Tupperware to mix your paints in, a cup of water, a napkin, a paintbrush, masking tape, a ruler, and a pencil. You will also need some thick paper, such as the paper in your sketchbook. That is what's preferred for this assignment. However, if you only have construction paper or printer paper, that'll work just fine too. Watercolor paper will also be a great choice for this assignment. Before I begin, I'm just making sure that all of my materials are in front of me. Again, that's my paper, that's my water cup, my paints, my paintbrush, my plate. Alright, now I'm just taking my ruler and I'm getting ready to map out my workspace here. So what I'm doing is I am mapping out and measuring 1 inch by 1 inch squares. As you can see in my first row, I made 3 1 inch by 1 inch squares. And in my second row, I am also making another set of 3 1 inch by 1 inch squares. For my third row, I am also making 1 inch by 1 inch squares, but this time I am making 4 of them. And then for my last row, I'm just making 2 1 inch by 1 inch squares. So in total, you should have 12 1 inch by 1 inch squares in the end. Alright, now it's time to begin painting. Do you ever notice how when you start to paint, your paper starts to crinkle and curl? That's why I am using the masking tape. The masking tape will prevent it from crinkling and curling. So as the paper dries, it will actually dry flat. Alright, now I'm going to start to begin painting. I'm going to go for my red. So I'm going to wet my brush. And I'm really going to work my wet brush onto that red paint there. I'm really going to saturate my brush with a lot of that red paint. Really going to get it deep into the bristles. Okay, test a little bit on my plate and a little bit on my paper. And I have the opacity that I want, so I'm going to add it to my square as carefully as I can, trying to stay 100% in the lines, as carefully as I possibly can. And great success, it worked out. So now I can rinse my brush off very carefully, blot it on my napkin. Alright, then watch very carefully. After I am done rinsing my brush and blotting it on my napkin, I'm just going to do a test strip on my practice paper. If there is no color that comes out on the paper, that's how you know your brush is clean and you can proceed to the next step. However, if there is some color, you need to keep rinsing your brush. If you don't find any color, you can keep going. Alright, now it is time for blue. And just like the red, I am saturating my brush very heavily, very vigorously. I'm really working it into the bristles with a nice wet brush. And again, just like the red, I am staying inside the lines as closely as I possibly can. Neatness counts. And great success. Now I rinse my brush, I turn my water purple. And again, that test strip. Nice and clean. No color deposit. Okay, time for that yellow. Going crazy, saturating my brush, getting a lot of it on there. More yellow. Can't get enough of it. Getting it right inside that square. Oh, more yellow. Again, 100% in the lines. All right, another test strip because I cleaned my brush. Clean paper. And my primaries are complete. They look great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to label them. I got my red, my blue, and my yellow. And my water is looking pretty disgusting, so I am going to replace it. And I actually did it that quickly. So now it is time for my secondaries. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line from the yellow and the red to one box. And I will draw another dotted line to another box from the blue and the yellow. And then another box from the blue and the red to the last box. And I will label this section secondaries. So that first box, I will label it violet with the little R plus B for red plus blue. And the second box, I will label it orange with a little R plus Y for red plus yellow. And the last box, I will label it green with a little Y plus B for yellow plus blue. All right, now I'm gonna go for that violet. I'm gonna take a red and a blue. Again, that's a red and a blue, and I'm gonna start with the red as my base color because red is weaker than blue. I'm gonna start to work that red, a lot of red into my brush. So I get just a little bit on my plate, and I want you to notice how small this section is. Very small. Okay, rinse my brush a little bit, some of the red off. Just doing a test strip to see if it's clean, and it is. So I'm just take a little bit of blue, go back to my plate, mix it into that very small section of red, keeping it very small, working a very small section. Really working to get that violet. And notice I only took a little bit of blue. That's so that I don't turn this into blue paint. We want to keep this violet. All right, really working it in there. Do a little test strip on my paper. I'm kind of happy with it, but I think I want a little bit more blue in there to turn a little bit more violet. Kick a little bit to the side. Just kind of work it in. Do another test strip. And I think I'm kind of happy with it, so I'm just going to kick it into this first square here where I labeled it violet. Keeping it nice inside the lines. Again, neatness counts. And I'm satisfied with it, so now it's time for orange. So for orange, I'm going to use yellow and red with yellow as my base color. Keep that in mind, yellow will be your base color. I want you to really work with your yellow here as your base color. Really work it into your brush. Go nuts. Really saturate your brush. Get it onto your plate. Again, small sections. That way you prevent your paint from drying out. And I just rinsed my brush there, cleaned it off, did a test strip, clean on my paper. All right, so I took just a pinch of red and I'm working it into my yellow. Again, staying in that small section, I'm doing a little sample there, and I was happy with it. So I'm kicking it into my orange space. But here's the deal, as I lay this orange down, I think it's just a little transparent. That's why it's really important that you make sure that you sample your stuff before you actually lay it down on your square. So right now, I am just going back into my palette, and I am doing another mix of my yellow and my red with a lot of that yellow, just a little bit of that red, to make sure I get that orange that I really want. And this version is really opaque. I like it, so I'm ready to go forward. So I clean my brush, and I blot it. All right, then you see here that little bit of orange on my yellow. We gotta get rid of that. So now I'm gonna show you how to clean it. What I did was I took a wet brush, I went over my yellow, and all I'm doing is just wiping it off. Presto, it looks clean again, it's great. So now it is time to do that green. For green, I'm taking yellow and kind of that Yeah, maybe a little bit more of that blue color. Okay, so I'm really working that yellow. Again, yellow is a weak color, so we really got to saturate our brush, make that our base color, make that the dominant color because it's the weak color. Really work your brush. I am really saturating my bristles with this, okay? So again, small sections, working a little small section into my plate with the yellow. So a little bit of a wet brush, kick a little bit of that blue into it. All right, and right now it's okay. It's a little bit of yellow-green. So I took just a little bit more blue, kicked it to the side, worked it in, staying in that small section so that my paint doesn't dry out on me. We don't want that. Mix it a little bit more. Okay, maybe just a little more blue. So I'm still staying in the yellow-green zone. Okay, and I'm happy with it. And it's opaque. Did my test strip, so I'm kicking it into my square, staying inside the lines. Awesome. Okay, we finally have green, and we got our secondaries, so we are ready for the tertiaries. So we want to keep those secondaries on our plate. Please don't get rid of those. Those are good. Okay, clean my brush a little bit. And that water is looking nasty again, so I replaced it. Okay, so I'm going to grab my pen, and I'm going to write tertiaries next to this last section. And I will label my first set red orange and red violet, blue violet and blue green, and then the last set yellow orange and yellow green. If possible, please keep your violet, orange, and green. These are good. We will use these again. Alright, I don't know why I was tapping at the red orange because right now I'm actually getting ready to mix the red violet. To start the red violet, I am really saturating my brush with that red. And again, small sections on my plate, and I'm taking just a little bit of that violet that I mixed earlier and kicking it into my red. Okay, hold up. Freeze frame. I'm about to kick just a little bit of blue into this red violet to get myself there just a little bit faster, but it's going to go so fast. I want you to notice just how little of it that I actually take. Here we go. And see, it was so fast, it was just a swipe. That's how little of that dark color that I want you to use in that tertiary so that you don't risk turning this into a violet. Remember, this is red violet, not violet. So now I'm just mixing that blue into my red violet. I sample it, I'm still not happy with, so pause again. Then I'm just going to mix a little bit of that blue and it's gonna go so fast. Just a swipe, watch. And boom, just a little swipe. I mix it into my red violet and I sample it. Just a little more. I sample it again, and this time I'm happy with it, so I'm gonna throw it right onto my red violet. Again, staying inside those lines, keeping it nice and crisp. Neatness counts, always. And I am happy, so I can move on to the next color. Just blue violet, and it is so convenient because I already have a little bit of something similar on my plate. So now, freeze frame again. I am really going to saturate my brush with that blue. Make sure that the blue that you're using is more of a blue than a blue-green. Okay, so I saturated my brush and I kick it into that red violet. I sample it. Yeah, it's okay. I'm gonna take just a little bit more of the blue, kick it into that red violet, and I'm happy with it. So I will make this my blue violet. And just keep in mind the blue violet does look a little bit more like an indigo or kind of like a blue jean denim color or a navy. So we're happy with it. So it's time to move forward and I'll clean my brush, tap out the excess and wipe it off. Okay, my palette's looking a little nasty again, so I'm just wiping it off so that I don't tarnish any of my future colors. Okay, and I replace my water and my napkin. Okay, and now we're going to attack that yellow-orange. Okay, and you remember that orange that we made earlier when we were doing the secondaries? The yellow plus orange? We're going to keep that. We're going to use that. So I'm really saturating my brush with that yellow. That is our base color. It is the weaker color. Really getting it into the bristles, really working it in there. Get it onto my plate in another small section, and then I start to work that orange in there. We're not going to need it again. We're turning it into yellow-orange. Okay, so I'm going to sample a little bit. It's okay, so I'm going to kick a little more in there. Another sample. Still just kind of okay, so boom, another freeze frame. I'm about to kick just a little bit of red into that yellow-orange to get myself to that yellow-orange that I want just a little bit faster, and boom, it goes so fast, okay? You don't want to do a lot because you don't want to go overkill and turn it orange when it's supposed to be yellow-orange. So I mix it a little more, mix. I'm kind of happy with it, so I'll kick it into that yellow-orange. Work it into that square. Staying in the lines, and I'm happy with it, so I rinse my brush. I'm getting ready to go for that red-orange. Okay, so just kind of clean my palette off a little more because it's looking dingy again. Okay, so it's good to go. Okay, time for the red-orange. So for the red-orange, I'll saturate my brush with a little bit of red, kick it to the side of that yellow-orange I just made, and I will work it into that red. And I mix it up, staying in small spaces. Clean my brush. It was looking a little bit too red, so I took a lot of yellow, and I will work that yellow into that red-orange. Just okay. Kick a little bit more red into it. Mix it up again. Sample it. I'm happy with it. I'm going to kick that into the red-orange space. The reason why I'm happy with this red-orange is because it is more orange than the red and more red than the orange. All right, now it's time for these last two squares. We got the blue-green and the yellow-green. Two more. Here we go. I clean my brush and I replace my water because it's looking dingy again. Here we go. So I'm going to go for that blue-green first. So I wet my brush a little bit. I still have that green from earlier that I made with the yellow and the green. And I'm going to take a little bit of that blue on my palette. I'll saturate my brush a little bit. Not too much though, because it's such a dominant color and I don't want it to kind of drown that green that I made earlier. Get it onto my palette. Rinse my brush a little bit. Take some of that green from earlier, which was, yellow and blue. And then just kind of kicked it into the blue and get it onto my palette. Excuse me, the square. That's what I meant, the square. And for your blue-green, it should come out a little bit more kind of like a teal. Yeah, if it's looking kind of teal, then you're in a good place. And I'm happy with it, so I will rinse my brush. And blot it on my napkin. Get out the excess water. And last but not least, it is time for that yellow-green. So that blue-green is going to serve us well. I'm really going to saturate my brush with that yellow. You cannot go overkill here because yellow is such a weak color. You cannot take too much. So I'm really just saturating my brush with it, getting it a little bit wet to make sure I pick up more. And then 10,000 years later, I am ready to go. Okay, just a little bit on my plate in a small section. And then take just a pinch of blue. Kick it into that yellow there. And I think I took a little bit too much. So I'm rinsing my brush, blotting it. And I'm going for more yellow, even more yellow. Kick it to the side, take a pinch of that green. Not too shabby. Okay, sample it. I like it, so I'll throw it into that square. 20,000 years later. Staying inside the lines, nice and crisp, nice and neat. For that yellow-green, our final square on this chart. And yay, that means that we're officially done with the assignment. So I'm rinsing my brush off a little bit and I'm blotting my brush. And here's what your finished assignment should look like. Everything is nice and neat. Everything is nice and opaque. If you were one of those people who decided to tape your work up before you started, please just make sure that you leave it on there until it is 100% dry to prevent it from curling. Anyway, but whatever you did, great job. You officially completed your work. All right, and now it is time for cleanup and maintenance. So our palette is disgusting and that is not good. We need to clean it up. So what I'm doing is I am taking a wet paintbrush and I'm just going over my dirty paints and I'm wiping it off with a napkin. Just restoring each color to its original form, getting rid of any paint that shouldn't be there. And yeah, just making sure that my palette is entirely clean. If you are one of those people who used acrylic paints, these paints will dry up on you, so we need to preserve them. So what I did was I sprayed them down and I'm just covering my palette with a piece of saran wrap, so that way it'll stay fresh until tomorrow. And for our paintbrush, we need to rinse it off at the sink, and we need to make sure that we get all of the excess paint out of it. So to be 100% sure, what I'm doing is taking some dish soap, rinsing it off in my hand, really going through my hand and my palm, just making sure. And if there's a little bit of color in the soap, I'm gonna rinse my hand off. I'm gonna rinse the brush off. Just rinse, rinse, rinse. Get all that excess soap out of there. And like I said earlier before, there was a little bit of color left over in it. So I'm gonna go for a second round of soap. So if you have more color in your soap, please do a second round of soap. So I'm doing my second round of soap right here to make sure I really get all of that excess color out of my brush. This is a really important thing to do, especially if you're working with acrylic paints, because acrylic paints will wreck your brush if you don't clean it off. Okay, so my brush is clean. Okay, so I put it to the side. Okay, and I just dry it off a little bit, get rid of that excess water there. Okay, my brush is ready for the next time I go to use it. No leftover paint left in it. Okay. And I'm just going for my cup, dumping out all of my water, rinsing out the excess paint, making sure there's no color left over in it, maybe wiping it out if I need to. Okay, it's clean. Okay, then I'll take, kind of take care of the sink a little bit. Get rid of any broccoli left in the sink. Wipe it down if necessary. This is especially a good thing to do if you're using acrylic paints, because acrylic paints will clog your sink, and that's all you have to do. Throw your stuff away, and don't forget to clean your own hands. Okay, use some soap. Rinse thoroughly. Rinse, rinse, rinse. Shut the water off, and dry your hands.